Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming on such short notice. I'd like to start right off with my main message. I've respectfully requested the proposed bill to the Auditor General Act be withdrawn and to have the opportunity to consult with government to address underlying concerns. The core values of this office, which are behind you on the wall, are independence, integrity, and impact. Those values are tied to this office no matter who sits in this chair. And it's been that way for a century. Independence is key for legislative audit offices across this country to do their job. It means being free from outside control and influence. As a result, every Auditor General Act has this fundamental cornerstone in their legislation. What's being proposed here in Nova Scotia is a substantial change to the way our office operates. We have serious concerns that the changes tabled in this bill will erode the independence of this office going forward. These changes could mean any report the government doesn't like wouldn't be made public. The numerous veto powers could result in fewer public reports. The most important outcome of our reports are the recommendations to improve government programs and services. The potential for these recommendations to remain confidential could limit government accountability. Lastly, the ability to remove the Auditor General without cause, combined with the ability to control our public reporting, impacts the independence, integrity, and objectivity of the office. In most provinces in Canada, there has to be cause to remove the Auditor General, so Nova Scotia would become an outlier. There has been no consultation with our office on these changes. We didn't know they were coming, and we had no input. I'd like to point out, under our existing processes, we already have routine practices in place to vet the drafts of our reports, several times, in fact. Prior to release, including the ability to share with ministers and executive council in advance of our reports being tabled in the House of Assembly. I've been here for almost 4 years, and in that time, I've made more than 200 recommendations. With a few exceptions, government has agreed to almost all of our recommendations for improvement. We work hard with the departments to make sure our recommendations are reasonable, fair, and practical before we publicly release our reports. Through our audit process, I make a point to have open communication with the deputy ministers involved. Yesterday, I met with government officials to discuss these changes, and I requested the AG Act amendments to Bill 1 be withdrawn. And I've asked for the ability to consult to determine if we can mutually address government's concerns and while continuing to maintain the independence of the office. In closing, I want to mention the numerous audits with significant impacts to Nova Scotians that the office has completed over the years, such as MLA expenses, P3 schools audit, ground ambulance services, violence in Nova Scotia's public schools, protection of children in the care of the minister. We select audit topics that we feel are important to Nova Scotians and will result in improvements. It's possible that under these proposed changes, some or all of those audits may not have been made public. It's normal that Auditor Generals and governments, from time to time, have differences of opinion. On occasion, we agree to disagree. In those instances, in particular, you need an independent Auditor General. So I'll now open it up to your questions.
Ms. Adair, when you met yesterday, did you get any sense of why they're doing this? Did you get any plausible explanation as to why they needed this power?
So I'm not going to get into the particulars of a confidential conversation with senior government officials. What is important is that I made the request that they withdraw the bill and that we have the opportunity to consult and work through whatever those underlying concerns are.
And if that does not happen?
Well, I'm having a press conference today. I'm going to appear before law amendments. And I had the meeting with senior government officials. I'm open to suggestions. If anything else you think I should do.
Who did you meet with yesterday?
Senior government officials.
Were they officials from the Premier's office, officials from the Justice Department? Could you give us a little more information on that?
I'd prefer not to.
If the changes do go ahead, what will that mean for your job?
So it's been 3 days, right, since I've been aware of this. We are looking at the proposed changes, trying to understand it without any, legal people in our office. We do not have any consultation. We're trying to understand it. But as I said, it seriously impacts the ability to publicly report the work of the office.
The Premier yesterday said that his justification in question period was, we're trying to align ourselves with the rules of other provinces. Do you think that has any merit?
So I haven't had the opportunity or the time to do a jurisdictional comparison. I point out that there are 8 Auditor Generals that do have the clause that has protection. The others, I don't know, they probably don't have the constraints on their ability to publicly report, in addition to not having that protection.
Are any of the recommendations or the proposed changes to the legislation more egregious than the other, or how do you characterize them? Individually or maybe also?
So the proposed changes about the revenue estimates to remove our requirement to do that, we do support. That's the only piece. Other than that, collectively, it's the veto power that the executive arm of government, so a cabinet minister, the Attorney General, the Speaker, can delay or stop our ability to table report. That's the concern.
Ms. Adair, have you heard anything from this government that would lead you to believe that this one thing triggered this?
No, as I said, we've not had any consultation.
Do you have any reports coming down the pipeline?
Yes, we have a full slate of reports, and it's on our website. The next one scheduled is funding to universities.
And it's the fact that he has the 2/3 majority to be able to remove you from office. Does it change the water in terms of, if they had done this in the first term, the threat would be more implicit than real? Now the threat is very real. Yeah. I just wanted your thoughts on the timing of this.
I'm not going to speculate. I do not want to make this adversarial in any way. What's important is, I think it's important people know that I have made the request to withdraw the bill and to have the opportunity to consult and to address any concerns.
And if that doesn't happen, what could happen to the audit that's due out on March 4th?
That remains to be seen. We're taking one day at a time right now.
But March 4th is still the release date? March 4th is still the release date?
I can't say with 100% certainty because I don't know how tomorrow's going to unfold.
Right.
Did you get a sense of when they would get back to you on whether or not they'll withdraw the bill?
Not at this point.
What is the existing practice and timeline for going to government before it goes public?
So we're trying to understand the process for the bill working its way through the House. We've been told that there will be a law amendments committee, although it's a different name or something, and I'm on the list to appear.
So what do you do now? A timeline for availing the report to the government before it goes public? They're talking about 2 weeks now.
Oh, yeah. So there's many iterations of the draft report, which is a routine practice that is given to our audit contacts and the deputy minister. We have lots of exchange and discussion about, do they have concerns about anything? Do they feel that the recommendations are reasonable? We listen. We often make changes. We don't always make changes. We do when it's appropriate to do so.
Ms. Adair, can you continue to do the job under those circumstances if the bill passes as presented?
All I can say is my objective is to continue to do the job to the best of my ability and to maintain independence and objectivity throughout.
In your remarks, you made reference to past interactions with government about confidentiality. I think that you were implying that you have kept things confidential outside of the public reports. Can you just elaborate on that? How often that happens? What kind of things are not made public?
So we do have very broad powers of access and access to privileged information. We are very, very cautious and careful when we write the reports that it doesn't reveal inappropriate things. And we have that exchange from time to time. And we usually settle on wording that is mutually acceptable. There is a process. It is challenging, but we do it with independence and fairness.
The government signed a $7.4 billion contract last week for the Halifax Infirmary project. You've reported, I believe, on some earlier. You reported on some other health projects recently, Hogan Court last year. Is this something that you're likely to look at in the future?
I can't say that today. Right now, my focus is on the request to withdraw the bill.
If this legislation had existed in prior, you would accept it. Yeah.
I can't speculate on what I would or could have done. I'm focused on today and what needs to be done.
Can you, Ms. Adair, explain to the public why the government's ability to censor you would be problematic?
The ability to publicly report the work of this office for Nova Scotians is extremely important. I think that's what Nova Scotians expect. I'm very concerned that this erodes our independence and ability to do that very thing.
Premier Houston said yesterday this comes down to accountability, and people who report and sent to the legislature need to be held accountable. But is that true? Who are you accountable to? How would you answer that?
So there's things built into our legislation where we are accountable as well. We produce a performance report, business plan, audited financial statements. There's a process in place for all of that. I report to the 55 MLAs of the legislature regularly with Public Accounts Committee. There are many mechanisms of accountability built in to an Auditor General's role.
So it's not like you can do whatever you want at your own whim here.
No, so I'm not sure what.
Well, the implication of what the Premier is saying, or the extension is, basically you need to be held to account like everybody else.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment on something that the Premier said. What's important is I am the spokesperson for about 40 people behind this wall that work hard each and every day. And my message is I really sincerely hope the government considers my request to withdraw the bill.
Is there a risk under the current system that the public interest, public safety, or solicitor-client privilege, legal privilege, could be breached if we leave the laws as they are?
So we're getting into the finer details, and we haven't had time to do a whole lot of analysis, but there are mechanisms in the existing act around that very thing. For example, if there's a dispute between my office and the executive arm of government about privilege, it is to go to the Supreme Court for a ruling. And that's another concern, that that has been removed and that function and responsibility has shifted to the Attorney General. Although there is a mechanism in there, if you read the details, that it could be a judicial review, but why the change? Is it the same thing? I need time to understand it.
You speak to some of the practical changes that have come from the government accepting recommendations of your reports. Say changes to healthcare, changes to the school system.
Well, so as I said, 200 recommendations, many have been completed or are underway. Specific examples, the violence in the schools report. My understanding is there's now a new code of conduct across the province protecting teachers and students for violence in the classroom. That's pretty significant.
Obviously, the government is hoping Nova Scotians don't care. What's your pitch to them that they should care?
I'm hoping Nova Scotians are paying attention. And for the sake of Nova Scotians, I'm doing what I'm doing today.
We're going to wrap it up there. I think that's it's been a long. Okay, Avery.
Thanks,
last question to you.
I appreciate it. Have you had any past signs from the Houston government in this direction in terms of prior attempts to interfere with your work, prior attempts to kind of decrease the autonomy of the Auditor General's office? I'm trying to figure out if this is something for which there's any kind of precedent or not.
As I mentioned, from time to time, we agree to disagree. And we, for example, the recommendations that have not been accepted have been around largely the appropriation issue. Other than that, we work to a point where the departments are accepting recommendations. So I can't say any more than that.
Thank you very much.
Great.
When were you appointed? Who hired you as the first one?
So it was a unanimous vote of the legislature in May of 2020.